Welcome and happy Easter. Despite the cold weather, we have risen indeed. Like Jesus and many other prophets of liberating love throughout history, we are here to create beloved community. Resisting the forces of hate, we act with compassion, reason, and respect. We and the enormity of our shared power are here to promote justice. I am Rev Nic Filzen. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm honored to continue shaping today's holy moment with worship host Chris Garcia, with our music director Josef, Patchen, who you just heard, and the UCA choir, the folks in our tech deck, and all of you. We are all shaping this moment together, all making this moment holy. Of course, any visitors are welcome here this morning, including if you're visiting through Zoom. And if you are joining via Zoom this morning, I do invite you to stay on the call for at least a few minutes after the service to have some of your own fellowship time. And if you're visiting in person, I invite you to fill out the blue card in the seat pocket in front of you and give that to the greeters as you leave today. And that information will allow us to stay in better touch and start to get to know each other well. Also, if you are a visitor, you have an orange name tag on. I think there are a few of you this morning. And we hope that you will stay after the service yourselves for a little bit to have a coffee and maybe get to know people here a little bit better too. And whether you're here for the first time or the 1,000th, I really, sincerely, truly hope you get what you need today. I have just a few short announcements to share before we begin our Easter service in earnest. There will not be a story for all ages or faith formation for our young folks today, though the nursery is available, as always, for those who need it. Our older kids will be here throughout the service. However, it will be kind of a shorter service, so we can have our egg hunt directly afterwards. Desiree had mentioned that the Easter Bunny may need some assistance to help hide eggs just after the sermon is over. If you have already spoken to her about that, I am grateful. I'll be spending time with my dear minister colleagues at the Mountain Retreat Center this week, and therefore won't have my normal office hours. And I'll only be checking my email and phone messages periodically. If there is an emergency, though, let me know, and I will come back. The March for Trans Rights, which was supposed to be yesterday, is now postponed until next Saturday. You may have noticed it was pretty rainy yesterday. So next week it'll be the same time, same place as originally planned for yesterday. And finally, keep thinking about how you might contribute to our upcoming service auction this year, which will take place on May 6th. Our fantastic auction team has really planned a wonderful event, and stay tuned for some important links to come out, which will help to organize the experience and get some of our auction items that you might be willing to donate kind of into the mix. Now, again, this is primarily a service auction. Folks from the congregation will offer services like meals, private concerts, and even international vacations. And if you donated last year, you can expect a call from the team to see if you'll be willing to donate again. And now, as we fully enter worship, may we awaken once again to the ongoing creation of love, a shared process filled with infinite acts of loving resistance.
Good morning. The fire of love burning deep in every human heart calls us to awaken. Awaken to the work of justice. Awaken to the work of compassion. Awaken to the work of community. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, may the chalice flame that we now light guide our hearts into a service for the greater good and holds all living things in its holy embrace.
Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People.
These are excerpts from the book of Matthew, chapters 27, 28, in the translation of the Christian Bible. When morning came, all the men who were scared of losing their power conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him and they led him away, and they handed him over to Pilate, the governor.
Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by those who feared his message of liberation, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed.
Now, at the Passover festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Who do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of fear and spite that they had handed him over. Now, the local authorities persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Well, which of these two do you want me to release to you?" And the people said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Well, then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" all of them said, "Let him be crucified." And then he asked, "Well, why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified."
So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water, washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
And then the soldiers of the governor, they took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him, and they put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. And then they put a reed in his right hand, and they knelt before him, and they mocked him. They spat on him, and then they took the reed and swatted him on the head with it. After mocking him, they stripped him of his robe, and they put his own clothes on him, and then they led him away to crucify him.
As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him.
Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and the elders, all those who thought that they had kept their sense of power, and were mocking him, saying, "He saved others, but he can't save himself."
From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last.
Many women were there looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, and among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee.
When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was himself a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. So Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. He then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb.
After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord, descending from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing was white as snow. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has been raised, as he said. Come see the place where he lay, and then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has been raised from the dead." And so they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples.
Now is the moment in our service where we connect as deeply as we can within ourselves, to our bodies, to the world around us, and as we listen closely to these following words from a sermon entitled From Resurrecting Hope by Union Minister Reverend Peter Friedrichs. And after I read the short reading, we'll enter into a period of about 2 minutes of silence where I hope you'll reflect on the words. Easter reminds us that resurrection is always possible. In its purest sense, resurrection means simply to rise again. And that's what I mean when I say resurrection is always possible. We can all rise again and again and again. That is not to say that there aren't systems of oppression that work against the resurrection of some of us. There are. But I align myself with those who express this possibility of rising again in the language of resistance that declares, they tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. May it be so, and amen.
Happy Easter. So, we all pretty much know what Jesus was doing on Friday, and we all pretty much know what he did this morning, probably right about now. But you may not know what he did on Saturday. The Bible says that he descended into hell, but it doesn't say what he did there or why he did it. It just said that he did it. And then, as we know, on Easter, he arose from the dead and from the tomb. Now, one of my spiritual heroes is a Christian mystic and a Franciscan priest named Richard Rohr. I recommend his books if you think that Christianity is a lot of crap. He will change your mind on a lot of things. Richard Rohr, the Franciscan priest, decided he wanted to make a pilgrimage to the East so he could visit the Eastern Orthodox Church. Now, that is a very radical thing for any order of Catholicism to do, and this is why. About 1,000 years ago, give or take, around the year 1045, the Roman Catholic Church cracked into two different churches. This was way before Protestantism. It cracked into a Western church, which became the Roman Catholic Church with all of its charms, and then became the Eastern Church and its variations of Eastern Orthodoxy, the Russian Church, the Coptic Church, and others. So he went to celebrate Easter with the Eastern Orthodox Church. He said that he went into a church to celebrate Easter there with the priests, and he saw a painting that completely blew his mind. He had never seen anything like this before, because it turns out that the Eastern Church has a very different idea about the resurrection of Jesus than what you have in the Western Church. Usually when Jesus is depicted in the Western Church, he comes out of this tomb, this rocky cave tomb, alone. Now, he may have followers kneeling reverently in front of the tomb, but he always comes out of the tomb by himself. In the Eastern Church, you have Jesus emerging from the caves of hell. Now, in the painting that Richard Rohr described, he said he saw Jesus depicted as flying through the air, like a kind of liberating, victorious spirit flying through the air. And right behind him, there were broken chains and broken doors and broken locks, shattered, flying through the air behind him. And behind all these broken chains and broken locks were all the souls that had been trapped without hope in hell. And apparently he had gone there. He didn't ask them why they were there. He didn't ask them what they had done wrong. He just freed them unconditionally. Now, with our Western sense of justice, that might seem wrong, but you think about it. These were, whatever you think of Jesus, if whatever you believe in this stuff or not, hold on to that image. He freed the people in hell without asking any questions. These were people who were miserable. Maybe they probably all felt that they shouldn't be there, and they had no hope. What happens to a person who has no hope and you suddenly give him hope? When you suddenly set him free so that they can at least try again. Now that is a resurrection for a universalist. See, this is not some cheap salvation where you sign on the fire insurance and say whatever you're supposed to believe. That is transformation. Transformation does not come from belief. Say it again. Transformation does not come from belief. It comes from what you do. It comes from great love. It comes from great suffering. And the greatest transformation comes from both of those together. That is the real resurrection. Transformation. Through great suffering and great love together. This is a time in our service where also we ask you to make a little offering, not a transformative one, but one that helps. Our second Sunday offering this month is going to go to a scholarship fund here at UUCA, this church, for students who would otherwise not be able to afford our summer camps that Teresa Say has been working hard to create. Will the ushers, if any, please come forward? Don't all race. Okay.
There once was a guy who lived in the Middle East. He came from humble beginnings, did some woodwork with his hands, and was a pretty decent dude. He managed to gain a lot of followers who hung on his every word, sometimes more than he wanted. Sadly, the world wasn't ready for him, as it often isn't for people who threaten to change things. He ended up being crucified, killed by the government. And yet, his followers persisted, and the movement in his name continued. If you're uncertain, no, I am not talking about the life of Monty Python's Brian. I'm talking about the guy whose name was probably Jesus, or so a famous collection of books claim. Books which paint the life of a man who was radically inspired to spread God's love, God being the essence, the thing, the concept, the stuff that is most ultimate and most intimate, most transformative and wonderful, and most creatively good in the universe. I'm not going to get into defining God anymore today. I think that's a topic for at least one other service. Yet instead, I want to talk about what Jesus saw as his role in serving God, serving good. Interestingly, it was very similar, I believe, to what we believe here as Unitarian Universalists, that to serve God, to serve love, is to create a kingdom of good on earth, One might even call it beloved community. Now, the four Gospels in the canonical Christian Bible, the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, tell a story of a man who actively resisted oppression, instead advocating for a kind of flipping of dominant systems of the day, a flipping, like a table, from a society in which a few mostly rich people had power over everyone else, disregarded everyone else, murdered people who didn't look like them, who didn't believe the same stuff as them, who chose to believe something a little different, cast out people who were considered unclean, shunned people who had jobs that were disrespected. Now, all those oppressed folks I just mentioned are the folks that Jesus supported. That's who Jesus spent his time with, and with whom Jesus started his resistance movement of love. Now, in the context of a couple millennia ago, 2,000 years-ish, Rome had spread its empire around most of modern-day Europe and what we now call the Middle East. It did so by using local oligarchs, inserting sympathetic regional indigenous governors and religious elders who, with contempt for the Roman Empire, nonetheless took advantage of any power gained by working for it, if for no other reason than to survive. Now, taken as a whole, this masterful strategy to expand and maintain Rome's unmitigated authority. So there's this kind of multi-tiered path of political domination, which was the setting for Jesus' life. And he wasn't all about that. And he certainly wasn't willing to let any of it imprison his spirit, that part of him most connected to his God. He started preaching a message that was very much counter to the dominant ideas of the day, though still importantly steeped in his own Jewish identity. Jesus instigated a powerful resistance movement, not with swords or arrows, instead with love and hope, occasional righteous anger, and a community, a growing community, a coalition, a Christ coalition, which started with 12 primary conspirators of love, sometimes called disciples, and then 70 other folks that he sent out around the region to spread this, the good news, his gospel of liberation, of compassion, of justice, all of which are states both internal to the soul and external amidst human relations. Now, this message of hope and love became a real threat to existing power structures of the time. And sadly, systems of dominion tend to not like when there's a real threat to that power, even when it's nonviolent, perhaps especially when it's nonviolent, because it's so effective. And so, as all four Gospels claim, and as the Christian story goes, Jesus was crucified, martyred on a cross for his resistance movement built entirely upon creative love. And then, the story goes, he came back from the dead 3 days later. This was the triumphant return from death that scriptures foretold, that laughed in the face of sin and evil. Life resisted death. And though I personally don't buy that he actually came back from death, I believe that though he was mortally wounded, through his physical death, the resistance movement had enough life in it to not just survive, but expand. A movement which tried its very best to serve the mission for which Jesus gave his life. a mission of love, a mission toward realizing the kingdom of good here on earth, a kingdom that promised to eclipse all other dominant systems. I'm sure we're all aware that it didn't take too long for that movement to be usurped by the very systems it was meant to change. The Christian movement became the official religion of empire itself. And since then, a lot of damage has been done. A lot of unfathomable violence, millennia of violence has been done with Jesus' name attached to it. Some very cunning folks figured out how to make a religion for the oppressed a religion for the powerful. They took that story, made it their own, enslaved it, used it to increase their power in new systems of oppression. Yet those of us who believe in that original mission of love, of liberation, of centering the folks at the bottom of society, folks who Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman calls the disinherited, whose backs are against the wall. There are those of us who also believe that centering our spirits in a way that maintains freedom, true liberation from anything that might try to control us. We can wrestle that liberative, just, loving story right back. We can resurrect it as a radical, defiant act of resistance to empire. And frankly, there is no one story. This happens to be the story of the day, right? Easter. But there is no one story to rule them all. And understanding that truth gives us a chance to choose the story or any version thereof that helps us do the work of Christ, helps us love the most, allows us to do the most good. The Life of Brian is just one of those stories. The British comedy group Monty Python offers a very irreverent look at how a person who is just trying to live a good life can be turned into an idol, whether they want it or not. And in Brian's life, things go pretty much as though they go for Jesus in the Bible, though with a lot less divine intention. Yet within this story, within Brian's story that's already irreverent and subversive as heck, I believe that Jesus would appreciate the final message, a message which is completely resistant to cultural empiricism, to cultural supremacy. Trying my best to avoid toxic positivity, that message is, at the end of the day, even though the world is tragic and violent and a few other choice words, there are ways for us to continue having hope for the future, to know our work together will get us to beloved community, perhaps having a good laugh or two along the way. And on a more somber note, many people, like Jesus, have needlessly lost their lives for this ultimate heavenly achievement and mission. So many prophets who have pushed against dominion have died for their resistance. I'm not all about hero idolization, and as a general rule, I do not condone martyrdom. Nothing is worth the loss of any individual life other than the natural consequences of a life well lived. And our coalition is stronger with everyone in it. We need everybody. Love cannot thrive if we don't survive. And yet we continue to resist with a radical hope and abiding love and community. I have faith that this resistance movement of love we continue thousands of years later will ultimately deliver us from hate into the kingdom of good. May we keep the Spirit of Christ alive in our hearts and actions each day. May we be the resurrection of Christ's Spirit. May we tell and create stories that show the endless possibilities of the just, divine humanity that Jesus modeled. And may we do so without becoming martyrs ourselves. And when we do lose people or we die ourselves, as we are known to do as living beings, may this work, may our story of loving resistance live for eternity on this world in the endless ripples of our lifelong, life-giving impact. Blessed be.
Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again.
You may remain risen in body or spirit, if you'd like. As today's closing words, we're going to go through a series of prophetic words from modern day disciples of love. Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman says, "Love is positive and creative, for it seeks always the maintenance and the furtherance of life at its highest level. Love is the active, working principle in all true morality. It alone gives purpose to life, for it is by love that the fullness of life is measured. Love is not the sentimental something that we talk about. It's not merely an emotional something. Love is creative, understanding goodwill for all. It is a refusal to defeat any individual. When you rise to the level of love, of its great beauty and power, you seek only to defeat evil systems, individuals who happen to be caught up in that system you love, but you seek to defeat the system."
As Reverend Dr. Cynthia Hale says, to continue the Jesus resistance movement of love, we must be committed to building relationships across lines of difference, to recognizing the humanity in all people, and to working towards a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect.
As Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock said, the Jesus resistance movement of love calls us to resist the forces of injustice and oppression, to be agents of change in the world, and to work towards a society that reflects the values of love, compassion, and justice.
And this is what Reverend Dr. Cornel West has to say. To continue the Jesus resistance movement of love, we must be willing to confront the legacies of racism, sexism, and all forms of oppression that seek to divide and dehumanize us. We must be committed to the work of justice, and we must work towards a world where all people are free.
The words of Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, to continue the Jesus resistance movement of love, we must be willing to challenge the narratives of power and domination that seek to silence the voices of the marginalized and oppressed. We must be advocates for justice and equality, and we must work towards a world where all people are free to flourish and thrive.
Some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of life.
If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you forgot, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of life.
For life's quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your sin, give the audience a grin, and enjoy it, it's your last chance anyhow. And always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath.
Now life's a piece of, when you look at it, life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show, keep them laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. Oh,